Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We'll wait for the others to join before we get on with starting. Good morning, Andrew. Morning, everybody. We'll just give it a couple more minutes to let more people in. So numbers are coming in now. We'll just give it a couple more minutes. Okay, I'm going to make a start. I'm sure there'll be more people that will join us. So good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining the Swindon and Wiltshire Club's online webinar I'm Carol Heenhan, I'm from Bouygues UK, and I'm also part of the committee that is running the club. Today we're focusing on planning, and I'm really pleased to introduce Catherine Williams and her team from KEW Planning. A little bit of background for those that aren't familiar with KEW Planning. They're a town planning consultancy providing commercially valuable planning advice in relation to site acquisitions, advice on planning and strategies, planning applications and appeals, and strategic land promotion. KEW Planning has successfully delivered across a range of sectors, including residential, education, commercial and leisure, in the Southwest, Southeast, and also in South Wales, where they're based. In 2020, KEW Planning grew to 4 people, hiring 2 FT Welsh graduates from Cardiff University, who now accompany Managing Director Catherine and Associate Federica Ambrosini. Before I hand over to Catherine and the team, I'd like to remind you that this is actually a CPD accredited session. So I'll be sticking in the chat the code and the website. All you need to do is log on to the website to get your CPD certificates. After the session, there's going to be an opportunity for you to ask questions. So please do put them in the Q&A bar. We'll keep an eye on those, and we'll certainly try to answer as many of those as possible. And if not, we'll certainly get back to you afterwards. So over to you, Catherine. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. So good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for this virtual presentation. I'm Catherine Williams, Managing Director of KEW Planning. My team and I will be giving an overview of the planning and property sector over the past year in England. Today, our presentation will cover the impact of COVID-19 on the planning sector, an update on the planning sector in England and its reforms during 2020-21, building better, building beautiful, and the new national design codes, an update on the property market and the impact of the pandemic, and finally, our experience of these changes and a forecast for 2021. I now hand you over to my colleague, Nathan.
Firstly, an overview of the impact that COVID had on the planning system. The government has made some radical reforms over the last year. They published temporary measures in the Coronavirus Act 2020, which facilitated planning meetings, committees, and all other council meetings to take place virtually. This allowed the planning system to keep moving forward. With social distancing measures still in place, many were expecting the UK government to allow virtual planning committees to continue. However, virtual planning committees ended on the 7th of May, 2021. A High Court challenge was submitted to continue remote meetings beyond this date. Unfortunately, this legal challenge was unsuccessful, despite Parliament still meeting virtually up until the 7th of June 2021. The RTPI is calling for all its members to support and provide evidence of the benefits of virtual planning committees meetings. Many in the industry found virtual meetings to be more efficient, whilst reducing time and travel attending, as well as allowing many vulnerable persons to attend. We await further details as to whether any subsequent challenge is taken forward on this matter. The government introduced temporary measures to make it easier for businesses to adapt to the coronavirus regulations. Amendments to permitted development rights allowed restaurants, cafes, and drinking establishments to temporarily change their use to hot food takeaway. This was due to expire in March 2021. However, it has now been extended to March 2022, and the UK government is very likely to make this a permanent change. Many cultural venues have suffered during the pandemic. As a result, local planning authorities are expected to have due regard to past and current circumstances of a cultural venue when considering whether to grant permission for a change of use or demolition, which has temporarily been made vacant by COVID. The GPDO prevents the demolition of theatres, music venues, or concert halls. This is in place until the 31st of December 2022. The government made it easier to serve food and drink outdoors, standardising the process for obtaining pavement licences. The Act made it easier and cheaper for businesses to obtain an external seating licence. This is due to expire at the end of September 2021, but is likely to be extended for another year. Some local authorities have introduced their own external seating measures. Westminster City Council introduced a winter hospitality scheme between December 2020 and April 2021. With over 40 road closures to facilitate larger external seating areas for businesses, Westminster will be extending their alfresco hospitality scheme until the 30th of September 2021. Other temporary measures included eliminating the need for markets and stores to apply for permission until the 31st of September 2021. Extensions to planning consents were introduced to give individuals and developers flexibility. This ran until the 1st of May 2021, and there is no plan to reintroduce this. Local authorities were requested to temporarily approve the extension of construction working hours until 9 p.m. Monday to Sunday, unless there were compelling reasons against. This again expired on the 31st of May 2021. During this time, the government also introduced more permanent changes, including new use class orders, new permitted development rights, and reform outlined in the Planning for the Future white paper. In the Prime Minister's Build, Build, Build speech on the 30th of June 2020, he stated a complete overhaul of the planning system was necessary, with it being outdated, slow, and inflexible. The new use class order was introduced to facilitate a mix of uses within one building without the need for a change of use permission. This came into force on the 31st of August 2020. Changes include the abolition of the use class A and its replacement as the new use class E, commercial. This now notably includes healthcare. This radical overhaul created much uncertainty for new tenants wanting to take a lease, particularly whilst the JR against the new UCO was sought. Interestingly, there are some uses now not featured exclusively in the UCO, as hot food takeaways. These now become sui generis. The government also introduced permanent changes to permitted development rights, which included allowing existing blocks of flats to be extended upwards by 2 stories, allowing commercial properties to extend upwards by 2 stories on freestanding blocks and on buildings in a terrace, which are in A1, 2, 3, and B1A use, and allowing for the demolition of vacant and redundant freestanding buildings that are in office and or residential use to be replaced with residential development. There are a raft of other changes which include allowing the change of use from commercial, business and service to residential. This was aimed at vacant commercial units in the town centres being repurposed. The extension of schools, colleges, universities and hospitals to support faster delivery. There is also a similar right for prisons and defence sites. Faster decisions for major planning applications, with the statutory period for determination being reduced from 13 to 10 weeks. There has been considerable opposition from the industry, and government has been urged to reverse their decision, most notably on the PDR changes for conversion of retail to residential. This related to the loss of vibrant frontages and the creation of poor quality homes. The most important and radical changes came through the white paper, Planning for the Future, in August 2020. The white paper aimed to streamline and modernise the planning process, improve outcomes on design and sustainability, reform mechanisms for developer contributions, and ensure more land is available for development where needed. The proposals focused on structural changes to the planning system, such as planning obligations, affordable home provision, and encouraging SMEs to develop local smaller plots, but not much detail has been published on this front. The government described the planning system as an inefficient, opaque process which delivers poor outcomes. Some concerns outlined in the white paper can be seen on the screen. Simply put, the government perceives that there are not enough high-quality homes being built, especially in places where the need for new homes is the greatest. And now I'll pass you over to Tania to continue the presentation.
Thanks, Nathan. It is noted that adopted local plans, where in place, provide 187,000 homes a year, significantly below the national target of 300,000. The government requests new development to be beautiful and to create a net gain rather than no net harm. This should be reflected through local plans and local design codes. The government has instructed all local planning authorities to adopt an up-to-date local plan by December 2023, something we have heard many times before. LPAs will have only 30 months to fully complete the document, not the average 5 years it currently takes. There is a desire to move democracy forward, where neighbourhoods and communities get a greater say and earlier engagement. COVID has highlighted how we can use modern technology to progress and be more efficient. The government want to simplify the role of local plans, with the aim of significantly shortening the document length. The ambition is that local plans will set clear rules and identify areas for development. These simplified plans will have zoned areas for development, categorised as protected areas where development is restricted, renewal areas which are suitable for some development such as gentle densification, and growth areas which are suitable for substantial development and where outline approval for development would be automatically secured for forms and types of development specified in the plan. This could potentially halve the time it takes to secure planning permission on larger sites identified in the growth areas of the plan. It will also allow authorities to identify sub-areas in their growth zones for self and custom-built homes. A digital-first approach to modernise the planning process will be instigated. The government has stated that they will support local authorities to use digital tools to support a new civic engagement process for local plans and decision-making. This should be done by making it easier for people to understand what is being proposed and its likely impact on them through digital approaches. There is a strong focus on design and sustainability. The government wants to ensure the planning system supports the wider UK initiatives to combat climate change and maximise environmental benefits. This would be achieved through encouraging proposals with high quality design, where they reflect local character and take into account the public's opinion. Importantly, government has emphasised that this is not a fast track for beauty, although on the face of it, one may say it looks that way. Design guidance and codes, which set the rules for design of new development, are to be prepared locally and based on genuine community involvement. The intention is to establish a new body to support the delivery of design codes in every local planning authority. This will ensure capacity and capability locally to raise design standards and the quality of the built environment. The white paper seeks to ensure developers play their part through reform of developer contributions. The community infrastructure levy and current system of planning obligations will be reformed by now being a nationally set value-based flat rate charge. The aim for the new levy is to raise more revenue than the current system of developer contributions to deliver at least as much, if not more, affordable housing. The logic behind this is that these standardised rates will decrease officer time spent negotiating and discussing viability. More land is to be made available for homes, people and services to support the renewal and regeneration of UK town and city centres. There is a focus on areas where affordability pressures are the highest. This is to stop land supply being a barrier to building enough homes to meet demand. The intention of this is to stop house prices inflating. The new planning bill is seeking to improve engagement with the following stakeholders. Innovators, entrepreneurs and businesses will promote a greater amount of land near workplaces and establish a more flexible approach of how land can be used. Residents will be more able to engage in the planning system. Local authorities will have better access to local data. Communities will have better use of technology. Small builders, housing associations, and those building their own homes will have an opportunity to navigate an easier, cheaper, and quicker system. And children and future generations leave an inheritance of environmental improvement. This has resulted in a three-pillar approach to planning reform in England, where Pillar 1 targets planning for development, Pillar 2 aims to plan for beautiful and sustainable places, and Pillar 3 promotes planning for infrastructure and connected places. Initially, the responses to these reforms were positive, with strong support for the proposals from people such as the CEO of Gleeson Homes. Conversely, the proposals have been criticised by the RTPI Chief Executive, Victoria Hills. The zonal approach to planning is a radical change that brings concerns to planners. A happy medium approach in the middle with the significant changes to PDR may be the more proactive way forward. The government has promoted their desire to build beautifully, and 1 year on from the publication of the Building Better, Building Beautiful report, they have outlined what they have decided to take forward. The government hold the perception that a lot of development is approved but doesn't actively contribute to the built environment. As a result, they have produced the following aims. These include ask for beauty. The government said beauty should be an essential condition for planning permission. Refuse ugliness. Ugliness means buildings that are unadaptable, unhealthy and unsightly and violate the context in which they are placed. And promote stewardship. New development should enhance the environment in which they occur, adding to the health, sustainability and biodiversity of their context. The National Model Design Codes have been updated and expands on the 10 characteristics of good design set out in the KEW National Design Guide. The level of detail within design codes and guides should be tailored to the circumstances and scale of change in each place. 14 councils were recently selected to pilot new national design codes, which included a grant of £50,000. These included Colchester, Guildford, Herefordshire, Leeds City, Mid-Devon, Newcastle City, Dacorum, Portsmouth, Sefton, Southwark, Hyndburn, North West Leicestershire, Nuneaton and Bedworth, and Buckinghamshire. This slide illustrates the government's example of intensifying an area with good design, which positively responds to its surroundings and incorporates elements of gentle density. It is envisaged that these codes aim to help nature by regreening our towns and cities, planning through creating a predictable level playing field, regeneration through ending the scandal of left behind places, stewardship by incentivising responsibility to future generations, communities through bringing democracy forward and closer to the people, neighbourhoods by creating places, not just houses, and education by promoting a wider understanding of placemaking. It is unclear if all recommendations will make it all the way through consultation and into policy. However, it is encouraging to see the emphasis on design and placemaking. I'll now hand you back over to Catherine.
Thank you, Mia. Next, we'll cover the property market trends we've seen throughout 2020. It's fair to say the housing sector has been booming. Predictions of a so-called property market crash, which people envisaged due to COVID-19 and Brexit, has not come to fruition. Research shows that UK house prices experienced the biggest monthly increase in 16 years during 2020. Within England, average house prices increased over the year to 267,000. The North West saw the highest annual growth in average house price by 12%, while West Midlands saw the lowest at 4.7%. Savills revised the predicted UK house price growth for 2021 from 0% to 4%. However, 2021 has been and will continue to be a complex year, with potential uncertainty, with more lockdowns and the imminent planning bill receiving royal assent. We do not yet know what the final act will state, which could also impact the housing market. With major investment coming to towns and cities in the North and the Midlands, it is likely that these areas will see significant growth. The high street and commercial sectors have seen a significant decline. Many businesses are downsizing their office space due to home working and several shops closing their doors. There is still uncertainty for commercial development, which has led many landlords and investors to diversify their portfolio and invest in residential developments to minimise risk. UK shop closures reached a record level in 2020 due to the multiple lockdowns and restrictions, with more than 11,000 chain stores closing in the first half of 2020. This was already a decline in the high street shopping before 2020. However, COVID undoubtedly exacerbated the situation. Although the high street is not yet dead, to stay vibrant, landlords and occupiers should make use of the flexibilities provided within the new E-Class. The surge in online shopping led to an increased demand for distribution warehouses. Amazon and other online retailing platforms have created a consumer need for the immediate fulfillment of orders. The closure of non-essential retail stores due to the pandemic meant that many shoppers started using home delivery for both essential and non-essential items. As online retail requires more intensive packaging operations compared to regular retail stores, additional warehouse space is needed. Knight Frank analysis identified that for every £1 billion of online sales requires approximately 1.36 million square foot of warehouse floor space. This means that with UK online sales forecast to rise by up to 67 billion over the next 5 years, we could see additional requirements of up to 92 million square foot. This is also the case for online grocery retailers. Ocado are planning to add around 40% more capacity over the next 18 months. Gusto intend to triple capacity over the next 2 years, and HelloFresh is also expanding. The rise in online retail will drive demand for couriers as well. DPD are reporting an increase of 40 to 50% in volumes pre-COVID levels and are actively seeking additional warehousing space as they invested in 10 more depots than originally planned in 2020. Food retailers in general are doing very well, with reports stating the UK food and grocery market is set to grow by 10% by 2022. As COVID has accelerated online grocery shopping, there are implications for the cold storage segment of the warehouse market. Savills research identified that the UK could see a need for an additional 8.45 million square foot of extra cold storage over the next 5 years. For developers, cold storage facilities offer a unique niche in the industrial market. This means industrial developers who have the capacity to produce efficient cold storage space in efficient locations are likely to benefit from the projected growth in demand. There has also been some significant development in port businesses in England, with the associated British ports making use of the UK government's plans to establish 10 free ports around the UK. ABP owns a total of 3,743 hectares of freehold land, one of the largest portfolios in the UK, which includes 960 hectares of strategic development land in prime locations across the UK. In March 21, 8 free ports were announced in England. These include East Midlands Airport, Felixstowe and Harwich, Humber Region, Liverpool City Region, Plymouth, the Solent, Thames and Teesside. The hospitality sector has undoubtedly been the hardest hit during the pandemic. Although restaurants could use platforms like Deliveroo and Uber Eats, this produced a much smaller profit for them, leading many restaurants and cafes to close their doors due to bankruptcy. The hotel industry has also been significantly affected, with research suggesting that recovery could take until 2024. Recurring lockdowns, a decline in tourists, a reduction of business travel, and the lack of live sport and music events have left hotels struggling to attract customers. PwC research discovered that hotel rooms are expected to be occupied for an average of 45% of the time during 2021, which means this sector will be struggling for a while yet. Hotels in London have been badly impacted, with The Guardian reporting daily revenues per room slumping to £29 per night, less than a quarter of the £129 achieved in 2019. Lastly, the healthcare sector has clearly faced an extremely challenging and difficult year whilst on the front line of the pandemic. Knight Frank's healthcare property market overview predicts a continued appetite from well-capitalised domestic investors looking to de-risk from hotels and leisure to instead invest in healthcare. The building of new care homes and other healthcare facilities will be crucial to meeting the needs of the UK's ageing population following the pandemic. So what did we learn from the pandemic? As an industry, we can adapt to change and act fast when necessary. Overnight, we became tech savvy with the likes of Zoom and Teams. The use of this technology has enabled continuity and in some cases improved efficiency in the planning process, which we would welcome to remain. For example, virtual planning committees were a real success and reduced delays. However, internet speed, quality of equipment and video conferencing must be extremely good. At a time when we are experiencing much uncertainty, the UK government has taken the bold move to overhaul the planning system, the clear message being that the planning system is broken and needs fixing. The new planning bill will introduce some very radical changes which effectively introduce a zonal place-making system akin to Australia or the USA. It will be extremely interesting to see how the new growth, renewal and protected areas will be introduced and implemented. Stakeholder engagement will be more important than ever with this new system. In addition, it is very encouraging to see the government promote the delivery of well-designed sustainable development. Most in the industry would likely agree. The outcome of the trial using the design codes in the 14 local authorities will be exciting. The change will no doubt cause some transitional difficulties as stakeholders grapple with the creation of the new codes and procedures. The use of digital technology to encourage and increase engagement with stakeholders is definitely welcomed. Finally, These changes signal that the government has the desire to make the built environment and planning process more accessible, to provide better outcomes and high quality buildings and spaces. However, it is essential that they provide the financial support and resources for local authorities to deliver these radical changes. Thank you for your time today. And if you have any questions, we would be happy to answer them.
Thanks, Catherine and team. That was really fantastic, really insightful. We've got a couple of questions. If I can start off with one from Stephen Clark. So, will national CIL charges apply in Wales?
There's only about 4 authorities in Wales that actually have CIL that's implemented at the moment, and the majority of them don't seem to want to use it. They're quite happy and content using Section 106. The new changes in England are proposing to abolish both Section 106 and CIL and introduce a different levy. There's been a response from the Homes and local government in a committee paper, and they are concerned. They welcome the abolition of CIL, but obviously have quite considerable concerns about removing Section 106.
Great, thank you. Another question from Amol. I'm going to read this. So currently transport planning during local plan stage is looked at strategically with sites allocated with condition requiring some sites to undertake more detailed transport assessment at planning application stage. How will the new reforms be undertaken?
Well, they should actually be planning for them within their strategic allocations, not just at application stage. I might add, doesn't always happen, as I think some people know. But the new reforms, they are quite radical in the sense that the timescales that they're looking to actually make these changes in. And it should be, there's actually a consultation that should happen part of allocations with any statutory consultees, and obviously highways are one of them. So they would be expected to comment on and look at the highway capacity and network as part of those allocations. There would be assessment work that would be needed as part of any allocation. So it would be done at the local plan stage.
Great. Thank you. I've got another question. How to change the use of roads that could be dedicated to build homes. This is to find land within the cities to solve the housing crisis and to alleviate the poor air quality. Do we need the same level of buses and roads dedicated to them after the pandemic?
I actually think at the moment the roads are busier than ever. In terms of infrastructure, there's a plan to introduce the shorter time period for infrastructure projects, but in terms of actually reducing the number of roads and things like that, there'll be a drive actually, if anything, more towards increasing the use of public transport like buses and rail. But I think there's still going to be a requirement for the infrastructure of roads, particularly when you consider that you've got distribution warehousing with online retailing. That's obviously a really, really prominent sector at the moment. So I don't think you'll be losing any roads to housing. You'll be losing your green fields, if anything. But obviously the reforms are to protect green belt. So anything that's green belt, an area of outstanding national beauty, a special landscape area, anything that's got a protected designation will be the protected areas. Renewal, it's not, and this is one of the issues with the planning bill, is that there's not been enough detail on any of the areas that they're planning to sort of categorise into these 3 areas. And that has been one of the criticisms of this, is that there's an awful lot of detail that is missing at the moment. And obviously at a time when local authorities are all still working at home at the moment, there's considerable concern about the pressure then of actually asking them to start a new local plan process, and how that's going to be delivered. I think there's quite a lot of concern there. There's a call for a package of 500 million to be awarded as part of this to assist local authorities in recruiting. There's generally recognised that there's a resource and a special skill shortage within local authorities as well to deal with this. Actually,
that's really interesting, because you've preempted the question from Andrew. So So the government have acknowledged that planning departments do need to research better to speed up the process.
Government haven't, no. So in response to the planning bill, the Homes and Communities Department have written a committee paper, which was published 3 weeks ago. And within that, there are a number of recommendations that they wish for UK government to consider before they actually formally introduce and allow the bill to become enacted. And one of them is to actually provide a funding package of 500 million, which obviously at a time when there's issues with public purse at the moment, do they want to be actually doing this? Frankly, my view is that Boris's reaction was very knee-jerk at a time when, the economy there was a bit of a panic with COVID and construction sites being closed down. There was really unclear guidance given as to whether they could stay open or not. Many closed down for a short period and then they all reopened. They recognise it as one of the key areas of ensuring that the economy recovers and keeps moving. But they're shifting now the blame at the door of the planning system to say it's too slow, it doesn't serve its purpose. They keep constantly changing it. So actually a lot of stakeholders, a lot of general people in the community don't understand. It's quite a complex system with all the legislative changes you get, and now you're looking at rehauling it all again. It's all very well saying you're going to digitalise it and during it's the local plan process, but then how is that engagement then played out when it comes to application stage? If you provide planning in principle at that local plan stage, if you've missed that, you're going to be totally unaware of some things that have already been approved.
Okay, interesting. So how do you see the role of universities in the changes of the planning system?
The role of universities in the sense of undertaking research towards it, or do you mean in sort of providing a supply chain of people that research?
Research, yeah.
Well, it's evolving so quickly. I think it's actually quite difficult to assess. In fact, I know for definite because Nathan is going to start a research position 2 days a week to help Cardiff University looking at ways to improve public engagement in a local community here in Cardiff. Where you've got quite a diverse and mixed cultural areas. One of the issues of the planning system is that obviously the majority of the literature and the way things are done is all done in English. It's not done in multiple languages. It's not done in a format that's really easy to understand with mapping systems, and it's a lot of text and it's complex language. So I think they're looking at ways to improve the wider engagement, and so there's an angle there potentially for researchers to look at that and looking at urban design codes and what works and what doesn't. We've got standard codes, we've always had them with the cave guidance. Interpreting those codes is actually probably one of the more difficult things. Some authorities have design panels, some don't. Is there going to be a design panel that's implemented in every authority to then look at, are these codes being interpreted correctly? It's incredibly subjective. We put up an example of what they said they considered to be a good gentle densification. If you've got something that's quite iconic, quite standout, you think of some of the, the landmark buildings in London, like the Gherkin, the walkie-talkie, the cheese grater, they don't fit in with their surroundings. They're landmark iconic buildings, and you will want to sometimes in certain locations, you will want a standout building that's, doesn't fit in with the surroundings. The codes don't actually necessarily make allowances for that.
Okay. What role do you think construction excellence can play in this agenda as a best practice organisation?
Planning, I'll be honest with you, quite often planning is a bit of an afterthought. We get brought in quite often, quite a considerably long way after the design is almost done. You're talking stage 2, quite honestly. done your concept, you've done your feasibility, and there's been, you know, okay, the architect is obviously supposed to be looking at that, but actually looking at the system and some of the measures that you need to be, you know, there are certain stages now that need to be looked at, and we'll be given a time scale to do the planning. And frankly, it's always never long enough, either because there's not a full awareness of the procedures and what you need to produce, and they're looking to shorten the timescales on certain projects for education and infrastructure and things. I think that will be another issue. You know, they're already swamped and they're struggling to deal with their workloads as it is. You then say, oh no, you've got to do it in in a shorter period. I don't think that'll happen, but having somebody there to sort of guide you through that process. So for me, it would be, we're trying to educate you in terms of, you know, all these changes that are happening, even if it's just a general kind of conversation, or you want some views, try and gain some input from somebody local to the area, planning consultant, or talk to the local authority about what their aspirations are. I think that would be probably the best way for people from the construction sector to help, and also to respond to the actual consultation and give their views as well. You know, there are senior people within the industry that could comment on whether or not the initiatives that are being introduced are actually proactive, or if they're a bit too onerous.
So some formal response from us around this would be quite good.
The British Property Federation is quite good at being quite vocal. I have to say, I haven't seen anything in particular in response to these, and they're normally pretty on it. But of course, it tends to be things more like if you've got like you know, increases in stamp duty or reduction, they're quite vocal. And like when SIL was introduced, they were incredibly vocal then. But I haven't really seen an awful lot in comparison. The RTPI has been incredibly vocal. There is a great concern. Planners do love to, I think it's probably one of the issues is that planning authorities can be so hell-bent on control that they almost take it the other way. And if there was a bit more flexibility and pragmatism that was given from every local authority, but unfortunately one of the other issues is that you have every local authority will interpret things in their own way. You have UK government obviously saying this is how it should be, and then you have each individual authority interpreting it and doing their own thing. And I think some consistency would be welcomed.
Okay, great. So I haven't got any more questions. So is anything just you'd like to finish with, Catherine?
Well, just if there's anybody who has any questions about everything we're looking at. We haven't actually got a timeline for when they're actually planning to pass the bill. So we're watching and waiting with bated breath. It would be good if they announced a lot more detail with things before they do anything. But we've had so much going on the last 2 years. I think a little bit of wait for the calm, let's get authorities back into their office as well would be a really good start before you then start making massive changes. Because then I think the ability to engage and deal with people hopefully then would start speeding the process up.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Thanks to the team. And we've had a couple of requests for the slides. Are you happy to share those with?
Yeah, absolutely, it's fine. Well, not the slides of the recording. I don't give out the slides, sorry.
Because, yeah, we've got a recording. Yeah, great. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for everybody for attending. And hopefully we're looking to plan a couple of other events later in the year, looking at biodiversity, the skills agenda thing again. So, and we are hoping that some of those will actually be in person. So thanks for your time today and look forward to seeing you in the future. Thank you
very much.